experience, this player-authored experience, if anything, I think has more appeal today than it did back then. I think gamers are more sophisticated, and I think after you've played 10 or 100 first-person shooters, most of which don't have really much depth, they're in terms of gameplay, the differences tend to be pretty subtle. That this is kind of can be a revelation for those players. They come to these games, so we love revisiting the space that we did with the original Ultima Underworlds that we're doing with Ultima with Underworld Ascended. But we also want to go further. I mean, at Looking Glass, we were never scared to take risks, creative risks, and to innovate. There was a fearlessness about doing that. And I think that's in part why the games we did, people consider them classics, and why they still play well today. And so that's the spirit we want to carry forward. And, we're looking to. Another way I look at it is I'm somewhat amazed how relatively little innovation there has been over the last 2 decades, in particularly this genre. The graphics have gotten amazing, the audio, the production values, but in terms of core gameplay, it's been fairly incremental, and I think there's a lot of room to continue to innovate.
Yeah, this is Tim. I just want to expand a little bit on Paul's comments, in that I think that's something that really is a big difference between the sort of AAA direction that a lot of, especially shooters, but other action games in the first-person format have gone, and what we're able to do at OtherSide as an indie studio. On the one hand, the AAA studio means you get a lot of maturity in terms of user experience, and there's a lot of best practices there that we are able to learn from. But on the other hand, there's a lot of conservatism that comes with big budgets and with big expectations, and we as an indie studio are able to exercise, I think, a little bit more creative freedom, hopefully, than you. All right, I'm selling myself short, according to Paul. So, yeah, that's definitely something we're really ambitious about some of the directions that we're still able to go in terms of the player authored experience that a lot of the big games are kind of a lot more timid about.
On that note, one thing that I completely forgot about System Shock 2 that's obviously coming back now, and we mentioned it earlier, is you don't structure the game with missions. Something we are so accustomed to, that the game kind of gives us a set of activities, and that's what sort of facilitates us moving through the environment. Here, you really are like, okay, what's going on? I need to figure it out, and you just have to learn the environment yourself. Is that an aspect of gameplay that you're looking to explore again? And on that note, Steve, if you wouldn't also mind chiming in, I now realize that you made a game that kind of was based upon that same concept as well.
In terms of mission structure versus more of an open world, we explored both spaces at Looking Glass. Thief was very much a mission-structured game by intent. The Underworlds and System Shock were much more open worlds. And they both have their strengths. I'd actually be interested in Ken's take on this, because he worked on both Thief and System Shock 2.
Well, Thief, I think we very specifically was an attempt to make a Looking Glass game that was a little more traditional and commercial. Commercial in the sense that we saw, it's more like, to keep that Looking Glass thing. I think we called it action RPG until we had it before we started coming up with titles. That it was take the RPG notions of what we had and bring some more action to it, and be very story focused too, but probably more linear story focused. And that's sort of where Thief came along from. System Shock 2 was really much more, as Paul said, more similar, I think, to this sort of Looking Glass tradition of giving you a big world with lots of activities in it. Some of which, actually, there are if I'm not misremembering, I think there actually are missions. Like, you're actually in this level trying to get off the first deck to the second deck. So you need to open that room with that big robot in it. But Gainer, is that right? I think that's right.
Yeah, there are objectives, but it's at the end of the day one big interconnected space you can go back and forth between until you go to the second ship, I guess. But yeah.
But yeah, this was more in the traditional style, because I think remember, this is now we sort of think of genres, and it's getting better again now with now with digital distribution and things like Unity, that you could have a group, like Steve goes off with a group of a few people and goes and makes, a huge title with just a few people that can be in a much, that doesn't have to sell 10 million units or something. So they can take those kind of experiments. And Paul, like, I don't think you'd be able to do this 10 years ago because you'd have to get on the shelf space. You'd have to get at Walmart and you'd have to get at those places. And I think that's what's happened now, is now we have the opportunity, we can make riskier games. We can make more creative, we can take more creative risks because we don't have to convince some guy at retail that this is going to sell 10 million copies. So we can really focus on a core audience.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways. I think of Looking Glass. I mean, Looking Glass. Yeah, and I'm a fan. I'm looking at it from the outside, but my kind of perception is that they were ahead of their time in so many different ways, and one of those ways was they were like an indie studio. But in the 90s, when you did have to like get on shelves and get like magazine advertisements and stuff like that.
That didn't always work so well for us, but we tried.
Exactly. So I'm guessing you guys feel a lot more comfortable in the current environment to be able to do what you're doing.
No, absolutely. One of the reasons we decided to bring back the Underworlds with Underworld Ascended is that with digital distribution, through Steam and other portals. And we currently have a Kickstarter, so with crowdsourced funding directly from our fans, it really gives you new ways to explore these kinds of games that they're not mass market. A System Shock game is never going to be truly mass market. It's not going to be Words with Friends. It's not a casual game by any means. But that's fine. We don't need AAA budget. We wouldn't want a AAA budget. One of the downsides of AAA budget, and Ken, you can speak to this if you feel like it, is that, in some ways it creatively, really handicaps you, because if you're going to spend $10 or $50 million on production assets, that's just this huge weight of content that you have to build. It tends to be pretty static, and it tends to lock you into design decisions, long before the game is done, because it's hard to say, well, we made $10 million worth of art, but, we really want to change the game design, so let's throw that art out and do another 10 million. Doesn't tend to go so well.
The other thing that happens when you have a very large team is that, when we were working on System Shock 2, we were all in the same room. So even if you're not very good at managing a lot of people, you don't need to, because you're all just there. So communication's so much easier. Once you start growing to 10, whatever 100 people, that becomes part of the job. It's just, how do you communicate what's going on to everybody in a way that's efficient, and it makes you make a different type of game to some degree, because you can't turn as quickly and you can't take the same kind of risks, because how do you, not only is there the sunk cost Paul talked about, but just recommunicating what's changing is very, very complicated. Boring little things like that sound like really weird and managerial, those actually really matter in the output of the quality of the game.
Right. And team size is an important one, because it's just there's a human dynamic that if you have a small team where everyone knows each other pretty well, they just tend to be much more effective as a team working together. As soon as you get to, 50, 75, more than that, people don't know each other as well. And anyone's role on the project tends to be much more atomic. If you're just doing the animation of, the hands of various creatures, and that's your only role on the project, it's a little hard to have a sense of authorship over the experience. And
because also if things change, you don't really understand why they change, because you're so far away from the center of that decision making. So you get more frustrated, where if you're in the room with everybody and you have a conversation like, oh my God, I have to throw out 3 weeks of work because I get why I'm throwing it out. That's a very natural human thing, to get frustrated to have your work thrown out. But if you understand why, that helps make everything go more smoothly.
We had pretty small teams for that era in the late 90s working on System Shock 2. It was probably half the size team that was working at other studios, give or take. And at OtherSide, it's the same thing. We have very lean teams, and it helps the tight communication in the sense that everybody has a big role on the project. which is not more of a sense. It's actually it's vital. But it also has the benefit of constraint. And one of the things that we've kind of learned over the years is that some of the most creative work comes when there's real constraints. If you have all the budget you need and all the people you need, it doesn't force you to make decisions and decide what's really important, in a game experience.
That's something that really, that we learned, I feel like, at the Fulbright company, was just signing up for those constraints on purpose, because in System Shock, my understanding is that one of the big points you guys made was like, we're not going to have any living, people that you talk to and have a dialogue system with, unlike in Ultima Underworld. So it's just about, there aren't any other living people here with you, so how do you tell the story? And that's where audio diaries came from. And same with BioShock and System Shock 2. It was like the only living people that you see are behind glass. It's really just about you and the environment. And so obviously, with Gone Home, we were like, if it's literally just you and the environment, can that be the whole game? And kind of coming from that philosophy of how can you lean into those constraints that do start from what resources do you have and what can you actually pull off, but then making the most of them, I think is core to kind of all of these kinds of games.
I would also have to assume that for games like On Home, and definitely like System Shock, where you have such complex systems that can so affect how the players can be changing, that the importance of that, of working in close proximity and having that ability to know what everybody else on the team is doing is really essential, because if anyone was to go renegade and start to do things on their own, it could have a huge reverberation in terms of other people's efforts on it and how the level or the entire game is going to turn out.
And somebody might even call the cops on them. Two things. Back in the chat on our side, Sarah is saying that there are 2 more winners of System Shock 2 Steam codes, courtesy of Night Dive Studios, who brought System Shock 2 to Steam. And those winners in the chat on Twitch are Astrothom and Trent the Wanderer. So you guys just won codes. Congrats.
Hey, Astrothom and Trent?
Astrothom and Trent the Wanderer. Yeah. And second thing is somebody else is going to have to take over my co-emceeing duties because we got a couple busy days in front of us here at Fulbright. So I have to jump off of the stream. But thank you guys so much for having me be part of this. I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to be talking to all you guys because you guys have made such incredible inspirational work. So thank you for having me, and I'm really looking forward to Underworld Ascendant. I am a backer for sure.
Thank you for that and for joining us.
Paul, I also have to get back to my day job here, but thank you for. It's nice to hear your voice and Tim's voice and everybody else, and Stephen Kick and Stephen Gaynor. Thank you very much.
Right.
Hey Ken, thanks for joining.
Bye.
All right, everyone. That was Ken Levine and Steve Grainer. Steve of the Fulbright Company and Ken Levine of Irrational. Obviously, we greatly appreciate having them on the stream. And if you're only joining us now, I am Adam Sessler, and I'm joined with OtherSide Games. I think right now we have Paul North and Tim Stelmack. Is that everyone with us right now, Paul and Tim?
We might have another guest.
Yes, I think there are more coming, but right now, the 2 of the top gentlemen over at OtherSide Games, they're currently in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign for Underworld Ascendant. These are gentlemen who come from Looking Glass Studios, worked on the Ultima Underworld series, on System Shock 2, and on Thief. They're all sort of had their hands in various aspects of those games, and they are trying to return that absolutely beloved style of play as you wish game with Underworld Ascendant. We are currently playing and looking at System Shock 2 and having a great deal of memories about what it means to make a game like this. But I think also this is a great opportunity to talk to the 2 of you about sort of how you look to approach Underworld Ascendant, sort of what aspects. I think we've talked quite a bit of what aspects of these classic games you definitely want to carry over. But are there certain, I don't want to say the word concession because I think that sounds inappropriate. Are there certain advancements, be it in game design and obviously technology, that you now plan to incorporate alongside the
There definitely are. We talked a little bit earlier, and I don't know if everyone remembers. It was a while ago. We talked about the sort of systems approach that all the Looking Glass games had in terms of the systems complexity that leads to player creativity and emergent behaviors, and some of the good and bad surprises that can come with that, and the approaches that we take to manage all that.